Hello, everybody. Sorry, we are running a few minutes behind. Hey, Jason. Karim, how are you doing? Just checking who's on board. So some of you may recognize my face, and we have a obvious new face on our workshop here today on our spotlight. So this is trying to introduce Evan. Evan's part of the team over at Coda. So Evan, do you want to give a quick introduction to who you are and what you do at Coda?
Totally. It's great to meet everybody. My name is Evan. I run solutions, partnerships, and marketing at Coda. I've actually been with the company for about 3 years now, so dating back to when we were still in stealth mode and nobody knew what the hell we did or who we were. A lot has changed since then, which is awesome. And before I was at Coda, I actually ran part of the professional services team at Box. Spent part of my time in Los Altos back in the earlier days, and then actually moved to Austin, Texas, and built kind of the central team up there. And prior to that was in management consulting. But most of my career spent kind of evangelizing and helping customers understand why technology is awesome and how they can make their lives better with it.
Nice. That's one of my favorite hobbies as well.
Yeah, I think that's a common thread with people at Makerpad.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we just love diving into anything that's cool, useful, and that can help other people. So
Totally.
Nice. So I think, yeah, people have kind of filtered in a few familiar faces. Glenn, Colleen, nice to see you all. Kareem, Rio. Right, so first off the bat, who knows what Coda is and who doesn't? Anyone had experience with it? Just so we can gauge what we can poke around and talk about.
Tinkered.
Great word. Not really. Noob, not really. Not if I'm really curious about it. Noob too, right? Nice. Just upgraded. Okay, Colleen.
Love
nice.
to see the upgrades.
Nice. Cool. Alrighty. Well, Evan, why don't we go ahead and share your screen? If you just click on the actions, you should be able to enable screen sharing and share your screen. Actions is kind of at the top of your screen. And then you can just go ahead and do your demo, talk through it, maybe start off going through some of the basics and what it is, what it can do, and then I can go through and kind of field any questions and poke and prod about potential use cases, etc. That's my favorite thing.
Totally. Can you see my screen right now?
I can't, no. I think if you go to actions at the top, potentially, top of your screen, it's of your name.
Oh, I see. You know, the fun, when Apple rolled out their latest update, they really caused a lot of access problems.
Yeah, I did that one probably a couple of weeks ago now, where I upgraded just before a live stream, and then I had 0 permissions set, so I couldn't share my screen, I couldn't control what screen was recorded, etc., etc. So that was a real pain.
Yeah, can you see it now?
I can.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I thought I'd go through a couple things. One is a little bit of background on the why is Coda? What problem we're trying to solve in the world. A little bit about what it is, just the building blocks themselves, and then share just a few examples of things that I found super useful. I've been building with Coda for a number of years, so I've got a lot of different tools that I've made, but I'm sure there'll be a ton of questions as well.
Absolutely.
So actually, I'm running this presentation out of a Coda doc, and you'll see a little bit more of the power of that as I go through this. But I do have just a couple of slides at the beginning, and you can still see this?
Yep.
Cool. So yeah, just a little background on Coda. So we've been around for the last 5 years or so. Spent the first few years in stealth building the core of the product. We launched in 2017 out of stealth into an open beta, and over the next year kind of refined the core components of the product, eventually launching our 1.0 release in February of 2019, and our 2.0 release at the end of last year. So it's been a really busy couple of years doing a bunch of awesome work. But in terms of the founding story, I think the Coda started with a couple of observations in the world. I think one primary one being there's been an explosion of apps, productivity tools, SaaS applications to solve basically every single problem you could imagine in the world. But despite all of that, we've observed collectively as a team, but also our founding team specifically, that much of the world's process still runs out of documents and spreadsheets. And we were thinking, yeah, which is still crazy. They've been around for 40 years and they still have ostensibly been the same. A little story that kind of exemplifies this. Our CEO, so he used to run, Shishir Mehrotra used to run YouTube, product design and engineering. And at the early days of YouTube, they didn't really have a ton of overarching support for things like IT. And as they were brought into Google, they were running a lot of processes on their own. And one of the things that they ended up doing was building a lot of their tooling and capability on how they launch products, how they manage things like flagging, all on a handful of docs and spreadsheets, which externally you would think like, man, that's crazy. That sounds terrible. Like you should be able to use whatever technology you want. But Shishir actually thought it was incredible and awesome because of what he saw his teams building. And what you ended up seeing was that all these bespoke solutions were showing up in the team and allowed them to be a really agile and high functioning organization. Everything from how they run their operating meetings and cadence to how they thought about launching projects. They built basically these bespoke tools in the organization. And basically he observed that there's this class of folks who are kind of rising to the top who really invest in this, and we called them makers. And we believe that those are the people who, using the power of tools that are flexible like docs and spreadsheets, are the ones who will kind of be the software developers of the future. I think a lot of Makerpad's ideas of no code and how people should be able to build things without being developers was germane to kind of this idea. And if we took a step back and looked at makers generally across the world, there are a lot of commonalities. As an example, product managers and product developers are pretty classically makers in our point of view. Yep. They often sit at the intersection of different teams and functions. Their job is to kind of tie process together, but also allow teams to function the way they want to. And they, as a result of that requirement, they often do use a lot of different tools. Even when docs and spreadsheets are still at the forefront, they're required to use things like project management tools like Trello. They're required to use things like Asana because different teams have different needs of working. A marketer might want to be able to quickly navigate a calendar of launches that are coming up, whereas an engineer wants to see what the latest is on their GitHub pull requests and manage that. Exactly. But at the end of the day, we kind of were drawn back to this idea that docs and spreadsheets, makers tend to love them because they're flexible. Anyone can build them. They allow you to kind of build these bespoke processes, but they have some obvious problems with them. I think one is, you end up with a ton of different tabs. You have sprawl of docs and spreadsheets all over the place, no single source of truth. They're really fit for purpose. So like a spreadsheet typically is really good at aggregating and analyzing data, but as a user interface, it's not really that appealing. If you're collaborating with others in a spreadsheet, it can be really jarring when people are filtering and sorting. And they're just not really upgraded for what people come to expect from modern business software. They don't have good UI functions. Like buttons are mostly macro based. They're kind of hard to wield and hard to make user friendly. And so we decided to concept of the doc and sheet that people find very familiar, but rip it down to the studs and build it for the needs of modern teams and modern makers. And so it's been a few years. We have a bunch of investors who are looking at this space and think it's really awesome, and there's a lot of momentum here. And so we spent the 5 years building the product and launching our 2.0 at the end of last year. So that's the background. I'll go through a little bit of the what is Coda. Any thoughts, questions on that?
Yes, just with regards to how you kind of first presented it to like a type of person is kind of that product minded person, and often kind of sits in the gap between like product and engineering, like you said. And it kind of resonates with me because as someone who's from like a product management background, but was kind of erring on like the technical side, actually went through a coding bootcamp myself, only to discover that being a developer is exactly what I wasn't going to be. But it actually just gave me more of like an understanding of how that side of the business worked, and then how I could relate that back to my job and do a better job in what I was doing. So yeah, I think from the start, especially from my perspective, you're now the type of person that this thing is useful for, because you're working multidiscipline. One day you might be talking with like designers and developers and engineering and support and like customer facing stuff. So being able to like tie this all together in one place is great. And yeah, exactly what you said previously, you would have to use like multiple systems even to have like be able to do your job pretty much before something like Coda exists.
Totally. And it also it's interesting because it doesn't just center around a specific, like product managers are one example, but entrepreneurs are a perfect example as well. Whereas instead of it being like straddling design, engineering, marketing, they're straddling the entire business function and trying to build processes while building a business. And so they often suffer from the same things, which is I need to like invest in all these different bespoke processes and tools that I'm trying to use to support the business while I grow it.
And also different job functions. They enjoy like spending time in that like their thing. So finance people will love spending time in a spreadsheet. Like developers or engineers will like spending time in GitHub or Jira, and product people will be Jira, and then designers will be something else. So before this sort of tool existed, everyone was kind of having to like through gritted teeth like do stuff in somebody else's system, and like almost always do it badly just because they hated using somebody else's way of working. So this is one of the reasons why I like tools like this.
It's like the dozen tabs to do one job. We've seen that was our original demo. Just look at all of these tools you're using for the same thing. Well, cool. So I guess going a little bit into the what of Coda. So when we say ripping the document down to studs, what does that mean? And when we describe Coda, we describe it as an all-in-one doc, which seeks to basically combine the best elements of docs and spreadsheets, the traditional tools we're comfortable working with the user experience and power of modern business software. So the idea is that we merge all those elements together in a single new canvas that is collaborative, that can be shared, that can be used on any device at any location. But it lets you build things that are either as simple as just taking meeting notes and writing in a doc, all the way to something that feels as powerful as an application. So we decided to start with this concept of building blocks, which is what are the different things we're going to put into this canvas. So in the top left, we built a new doc surface. So it's flexible, lets you type in text and formatting and things like that. We embedded concepts of tables and views. So the ability to put structured data and unstructured thoughts and context together in one space. And with tables, but like I'll show you shortly, they're far more powerful. They function more like databases than they do spreadsheet grids, in that you can easily work with them, filter, sort them, but also lay them out in different ways that people might need them. Everything from charts and graphs to things like calendars, scans, etc. All in kind of a presentable and user experience focused surface. And then we expanded upon those basics, and you'll note too, as you kind of look at a bunch of different tools that exist in the market today, that this is kind of there are a few players in the space who solve for various components of this. The idea of having data and unstructured context together and being able to filter and sort and all that kind of stuff. But where Coda starts to really expand into things I think the Makerpad community is interested in is how we added app-like functionality and integration to the surface. So things like buttons are a first-class citizen in the product that let you do things like add and modify rows and tables, but also interact with external tools like Slack and email. We added an integration platform called Packs, which lets you bring in data from other solutions that you might have to work with as part of your job, like Jira, like Intercom, things like that, and push information back out to the world. We let you automate those things inside of Coda as well. So the capability that you might find in if this then that or Zapier, we've built a capability in Coda to also allow that type of functionality. And this renders kind of perfectly depending on your use case on your desktop experience, and then almost feels like it converts to an app on your mobile phone. So like a button, instead of it being a press, it might actually be a swipe action. You'll see this little image in the bottom right-hand corner. You get some cardified views of table data. It just makes it a lot more seamless and fit for that end state. And what we've seen as we've kind of grown these capabilities is that teams of all sizes have been using Coda. I mentioned a few different types before, but in the product realm, as an example, Intercom uses us to manage their R&D and feature development across all their different business lines. Uber used us to launch their latest major driver app redesign, which is hundreds of people across dozens of teams. And Spotify has been using us for goal tracking across all their different squads doing product planning work. But like I said, small businesses, large companies have all kind of platformed in some way or another.
Nice.
And across the world. So lots of people represented. Actually, today's a very special day for us. We just got recognized as one of the Fast Company's most innovative companies.
Congratulations. Absolutely.
Super dope. Thank you. We're all there's a lot of excited yelling. Just
one question before we move on. So I think if anyone's kind of seeing like Coda for the first time, there is obviously, like you said, there's a few like similar players in the market and who are kind of like obviously doing like different things. But one of the things which we love on like, the Makerpad side, and I'm sure can relate to a number of people in the conversation at the moment, is the actual like integrations and automations that you can do on top of everything that you've already got in there. So yeah, you've got your docs, you've got your spreadsheets, you've got your charts, which obviously fit the bill for engineering, finance, project managers, etc. But then you've obviously got all the automations on top of that and integrations, which, not mentioning any names, but for something like Notion hasn't got at the moment, which for me personally makes like Coda really powerful, because once a tool like this is integrated like into your stack, especially if you're like a small agile team that relies on automations to be able to scale yourself and your work and to hand off tasks, something like that is really important, because I know historically for me, and it might be the same for other people, is unless you can only work so much with something, that if it hasn't got that and it doesn't come quickly, it's kind of so painful that when you when you do make the shift to automating those tasks that you know you shouldn't have to do manually, it reaches a point where you think, okay, this thing needs to be automated, and that's why I find Coda awesome.
Yeah, we appreciate that. I mean, I think they're also, it's really hard to build. I mean, our foundation as a company has been, all of our features are not just features, they're building blocks. So we should allow makers to kind of combine them in ways that kind of match their process perfectly, and don't either get in their way or don't assume too much about how you want to do things. Like, case in point, a lot of companies will build like an integration with Slack, and the main way that it integrates is it sends notifications every time something changes in a workspace or whatever, which is cool, but it assumes that really all I want to do is like get notified when something changes. Whereas the reality, maybe I want to like trigger a notification based on a specific activity that takes place, and I want to get feedback back from Slack at some point. And so that's kind of how we've approached it. And it's part of the reason why it takes time to build these types of products, is that you're trying to build them so they're extensible, not just assuming a specific workflow. And you'll see a little bit about that. I'll go through the building blocks first, and I'll show a few examples, and then we can go from there. So yeah, just to go through a couple of the building blocks in Coda. So as you can see here, this is a Coda doc. It's a text surface, so I can type anything anywhere in the canvas, and you can see that actually if you type / you'll get access to a bunch of ways that you can interact with the text on the canvas, everything from formatting to how you might insert other different objects that I'll show in a second. And then one of the first building blocks we have is sections. So sections are a way of organizing your doc. If I actually expand the side panel, you'll see that I have this list or hierarchy of sections, which are just ways that I can store information. So if I want to see the team, here's a picture of us in our Seattle office. You can kind of click through this. If you want to see our list of customers, I click this section. I've got my list of customers on some of their use cases here. So sections just let you kind of naturally organize yourself or your team in different spaces. But where things get interesting is where you integrate table data. So our tables, like I mentioned, are like databases in that rows are specific objects that are named, and each column is an attribute of that. So whereas I've got tree, river, mountain, each of these columns represent a specific thing related to that. So this is formatted as a checkbox, so I can check and uncheck. This one's actually people have access to the document that I can use for things like assigning. This is a calendar. And then this is actually a formatted select list. So if I change from alpha to beta to gamma, I got some color coding. So one of the common challenges in spreadsheets is that you just have this kind of endless flexibility down to the like individual cell, which then means data integrity can be hard to manage. And this becomes really important when you incorporate views. So the idea that you take a single table of data like this one up here, and then you might want to view it in different ways. So as an example, this is the same table up here, and I can prove that by checking this box, and you see it updates above and below. But this one is actually filtered based on this little selector here, so I can choose things that are assigned to me. And what I can also do is hide columns from this view just to clean it up for what I actually want to get done here. And so this gives me a safe space for me to like take a large set of things and filter and sort and combine and just kind of decide how I want to work with it my way. Knowing that all updates to this underlying view will go bidirectionally between the views and other tables in the doc. So in and of itself, super powerful. It's really useful in the project management case where different teams are interacting on a giant list of things to get done. You can just filter things by teams.
Just going to jump in quickly, just because on the project management topic, we just had a question from Simon. Bear with me. It said, I recently brought Coda into our tech stack. I'm excited what we're seeing so far. Do you think it's realistic to be able to replace your project management of Asana and the internal wiki of Notion into Coda?
Totally. I think those are two of the primary use cases that we try to handle inside of Coda. I think in Asana, one of the common patterns is the checklisting features and the ability to group and manage tasks similar to what I just showed with tables and views. So a lot of that underlying capability exists with Coda. The benefit being that you can actually really customize that process, and then I'll show you the automation stuff afterwards, versus kind of relying on they have a pretty standard operating model of how you organize information. And then from a wiki perspective, one of the most common things people will do is they'll use this section list to kind of manage different parts of the business. So you may have, as a team, as an example, I've got a team hub of a section for who's working with me. I have a list of like our daily stand-ups. I have a section that has links like this one does actually to different parts of the business. And actually within the canvas, I can link to other places. So I can say see, and then if I just go and do linking customers, you can embed links to other sections from within the canvas. So this lets you just do a quick, the linkability between sections plus the table and view concept let you kind of take both of those and solve for them.
Amazing. Yeah, this is something it's obviously people are starting to get more used to, especially if they dive into something like Airtable when they're getting used to views and everything. So people that like Airtable, I'm guessing they're like this. Views, once you know how to use views and things, we're finding this like really, really useful.
Yeah, and it actually especially gets useful. Like one of the things you can do in Asana too is take the underlying kind of checklists that you're trying to burn through, and then you can lay them out in different ways. And so we have the same kind of concept here where this view, you could actually change just the layout. So if I go in here and I change this back to table, you'll see that this is the same underlying table that exists above, but now I'm formatting as a chart. I can do it as cards, calendar, whatever you want. You'll see below, just clicked out. So I've got like the Kanban view of this, so I can change it into cards, and I can do the drag and drop that I'd expect from something like Trello. And then you have things like Gantt, where I can actually move these tasks along. That will actually change the underlying dates of this task. And if I click into it, you can actually see the task almost like in a form
product
view.
management
So basically giving you, exactly. Yeah. I mean, we found so many people using, especially in spreadsheets, you'll do the color coding of cells. I used to do this when I started in consulting. I mean, it's like takes so long to do. And at some point you just get used to it. But then, you know, when I took a step back and when we first launched this feature I think it was in 2017, I was just like, man, how many hours did I actually spend literally color coding cells? And then someone like in the next room over is like, hey, you got to change the status of that thing for that period. And I would literally go back in and like sweep the color formatter. But yeah,
I get that.
So frustrating. So cool. So those are kind of the basics of tables, views, sections, how you organize your doc. And then I'll just go quickly into the little building blocks and show you how they actually help solve real problems. So example here, buttons. Buttons are like a super powerful component of Coda, and especially for folks who like the tactile experience, but also want to kind of program small tasks to do. Buttons let you do things like, if I click this one, this is just adding rows to this table above. And so if you see me press that button, you'll see that it's going and adding new rows to this table. And it's actually presetting a couple of fields for me. So it's saying add row to this table, put the title in, put the person as me, choose the value from the select list, and set the date as today's date. And so I get this like really awesome experience where I can go and just quickly take action inside of these tools. And buttons will often use one of the common things that you're able to do in Coda, which actually this section is deleted, which is using our formula language. So in this button setup, you'll actually see the date is equal to today, and today returns today's date. We actually, as one of the building blocks of the product, built out this really rich formula language that is similar to Excel, but it also takes advantage of some of the kind of modern paradigms that you would expect to be really easy. So for example, if I type equals anywhere, I can type it in the canvas or in a table. I do something like today, I can get today's date. I can type equals a table, which is the table above. You'll see it highlights it there. If I press enter, that returns to me the values from that table. And then I can start to take action on that information. So like a table.count will give me the number of items in that table. So if I add a new one, that will actually give me the count of new items that are in here. The next thing that it'll let me do is do things like take that table and I just want to see it like a bulleted list. And now I can see all four of those items here. So basically a new way of me working with this data that's not just tied to this table format and lets me kind of weave in this powerful kind of
so I guess something like this is really useful if you've got say like a team working on different tasks, and then you can kind of have like a separate document with formula which automatically then pulls in the information from say several different tables across several different teams, and then serves that up to say like a manager or a CEO or the entrepreneur in a way that they want to see the data rather than having to like sift through it. So you could serve up say the high priority tasks completed, what wasn't completed in like bullet point form rather than in that like table form, and then along with say like a graph of like number of tasks completed per week, and then etc. etc. So that's I like the way that it kind of like with your formulas, they can kind of update two ways. So some people will obviously have permissions to add a task or complete their task, and then someone will have all the tasks, and then top of the chain, you have someone you can go oversee everything, but only see the exact thing they need to see.
Yeah, totally. And we found too that allowing, I mean, you can do formulas inside the tables too. So I can do things like equals the number column minus 5, and that'll give me kind of the answer here based on the number. So like I have the access to do this like I would expect from something like Excel or Airtable or otherwise. But the fact that you can embed this within unstructured text means you can create these experiences. Like there's one task left for the beta project. If someone goes in here and assigns this to beta, there are 2 tasks remaining for it. You could basically create these experiences that kind of match how executives are trying to hear about information all the way down to the individual, you know, how I can interact. And I'll show you a couple of examples that I have kind of show this in action a little bit more. The last thing I'll just point to is just to show you kind of the nature of packs and automations. Our packs marketplace, these are all tools that you can integrate either by pulling data from those tools in or actually pushing data out into other tools. So for example, I've integrated the weather pack into this doc. What the weather pack does is it lets me pull the current weather or the daily forecast based on a city. So for San Francisco, I've actually typed this formula, which is give me the weather pack and give me the current weather for the city that I have listed there. And now I can pull in all the details from AccuWeather of the current temperature, what it feels like, what the image is, wind speed, all that kind of cool stuff. Obviously, a very fun example. Not it's useful in some circumstances. Actually, we have a demo that we've given in the past where, you know, if a photographer is manning different shoot dates and wants to be able to be like, hey, the shoot is scheduled for this time at this place, you could actually pull the weather report for those locations to make sure that everything's going smoothly. And San Francisco's microclimates, it's pretty important.
And how do you
plan for that?
Yeah, I mean that's incredible. And how do you actually connect packs? Is that something you do? Can people kind of write packs for Coda, create packs for Coda? How does it work?
Yeah, currently we've built the infrastructure. So all of the initial packs that are in here were things that we built in working with these partners to find out what the best solutions are. So we've got a large list of packs, some free, some that are part of our pro tiers. We'll let you do everything from, you know, working with GitHub or Figma designs or Jira tickets to getting your Shopify products and customers and orders, to pulling and managing Spotify playlists. We do have a developer, an API that allows you to build kind of custom solutions on top of Coda. So we've had this for a number of years. And so you can interact with table data, you can create docs, do all sorts of things with the API. We're working on the ability for you to turn that into a pack from an external party, but if folks have ideas, we're all ears and have a page where you can lobby for them.
Well, I guess if you have an API, then you can kind of do whatever you want with it. And then obviously if it goes into Zapier, then again, you can do that.
Yeah. Zapier is a really big one too. Yeah. For anything that's not solved for explicitly natively in the pack store, you can pretty much solve it with Zapier.
I've got a quick question from Sahel, 2 seconds. Do you have two-sided links like Rome research? If not, definitely consider it. The /today /date thing. It's kind of the same.
So meaning the ability to kind of synchronize data between two sources?
That's what he means. So is that what you mean? If not, let us know in the chat. Okay, got that wrong. Just give me a second. Syntax dual-sided links.
Interesting. I am actually not sure if we have that. Hopefully you're seeing this infinite, infinite window that I'm sitting. Yeah, would love to know more about what it solves for. If you have a descriptor, it might be something we actually do. But one of the things, semi-unrelated but related, what packs do, aside from like the ability to pull in kind of singular information, you can also do things like synchronize whole tables of data from other solutions. So for Jira, projects and issues are two of the common patterns that exist inside of Jira. You can actually drag and drop that table of data once you integrate with your Jira accounts into Coda, and then you'll see it synchronized into and many of these have two-way sync, so you can actually when you make updates, it's one way on the inbound, but you can actually you can make updates to other solutions using things like buttons. So if I wanted to add a button, for example, in email, I can use this to not only synchronize my email, but I can also create a button that sends an email from a Coda doc as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I'll show you an example, because I think that tells the story a little bit more. Just quickly, automations as well. Just in this ROS form, lets you create rules on top of Coda. So you can set a trigger and an action, and that will let you automate common processes in the doc. But let me move and just show you some real examples of things that I've built with this. This is my Maker profile. One of the features, this is a shout out to one of the features we just launched, which is called publishing. So makers have been building with Coda for a long time, but one of the common requests is, how do I get my content out into the world and share it more broadly? And so we developed a set of publishing features that allow you to publish it to World Readable and to a Maker profile. So this is my Evanet Coda handle, and these are all the published docs that I've made. So here's one example, which is just simply a day planner. And I'll say, as context for this, I have always struggled with to-do lists. I'm kind of our co-founder has two philosophies: that there's a set of people in the world who are etch-a-sketchers, which are people who every day kind of like shake and clear their to-do lists and start from scratch. It just makes it feel clean. And then pilers, who are people who just constantly stack and reprioritize a list. I'm an etch-a-sketcher. I like to shake it up and start clean. It's just my personal preference. He is very much a piler. You can see his to-do list in our gallery. But mainly, the main problem I had with other to-do list apps is, yes, so many of them have great user experiences. They allow you to quickly add tasks on the go. Some of them remind you and all that kind of stuff. But the main problem I have is I can't credibly finish the things that I want to do in a day because I always bite off more than I can chew. And so I built this little experience in Coda, which uses a combination of buttons, packs, and tables to more effectively manage my time. So in the beginning of the day, what I do is, this is an embedded control. It's a slider. It just lets me get a number on the other side. And so I'll look at my calendar and I'll say, how much free time do I have to do work? Because usually that's the limiting factor, is like I'm in meetings a lot of the time. And so let's say like I have 3 hours this day to do work. So that simple there. And then what I start doing is adding a couple to-dos to fill that time. So I'll say this is task 1, task 2, task 3. I have this little specific thing that I do as well, which is bespoke to my process, and others might have different, which is I try to manage my energy through work, like things that are accelerators or things that I really love doing. For example, building docs. So I know that'll make me super amped and excited to do the next thing. And then there's a bunch of things I know that are just like super heavy and cerebral that I'm going to need some deep work time for. Something that's just a refresh. And then I have the hours estimate. So how long is each task going to take? And what you'll see is, as I update these, the sum of the amount of time will update. And then this little color icon here will change from blue if I'm under resource, so I have more time in the day, to red if I overextend myself for the actual time that I have available. And so it's just like a simple way for me to like recognize, like, hey man, you're trying to do too much today. Make sure you like arrange and manage your calendar a bit more effectively. And then what I do is, the second part of my process, I just calendar block. So in my, I'm sure a lot of people here do this. I like literally go into Google Calendar and drag and drop little spaces for each of my to-dos so that I make sure the time is protected. And what I did is I integrated this doc to Google Calendar. And so what this does, the Google Calendar pack will let you sync in your event data, but it will also let you create buttons that allow you to quick add events to your calendar from within Coda. And so I added this little calendar button, and what it does is it will add that to-do to my calendar, and it will add it for the duration I have here. And so when I click this button, it'll show up for today, and it'll show up at the top of my calendar, and I just drag it into an empty slot. So I don't have to go and create it all from scratch. It's all just there.
Yeah, one of the features so far that I love the most is the buttons and the ability to tie that into the packs and the automations. I'm just kind of running through my head of everything we've got set up at the moment, which could be like 100 times more efficient if we had this thing tied to a button, tied to a calendar, tied to our everything else. Yeah, love it. Just had to get that one in. Have you got another?
And then I can do these little satisfying checkbox buttons. So when I check things off, I get this little green highlight. Feels really satisfying.
Nice.
And at the end of the day, I'll click this little delete button here. So because I'm an Etch-a-Sketcher, I want to get rid of everything from the previous day and start fresh. I click that, and it clears my to-do list for tomorrow. So this is basically just like a simplified view of a to-do list, but it's customized to my exact needs, the problems I want to solve. And you can see these building blocks kind of play together to create this.
Those of your tables, so I can just sort of jump in. What are the things like? So you had like a slider column type. What can you have in a table, and what can't you have? So you can put buttons and stuff, which is awesome. You have sliders, and then obviously the things we expect, like single selects and dates and text and numbers. What other stuff have you got in there?
Yeah, so you can create select lists like I have in this, different numbers, and you can actually, here's a fun one, you can do the scale icon, so you can actually adjust using stars, or you can change that to be chili peppers, whatever you want. Date pickers, checkbox, the people column, which is lets you select people who have access to the doc, and that'll notify them. Buttons, images, so you can put any kind of image content you want in there. And then these are kind of the more powerhouse versions. So lookup, you can actually connect different tables together. So oftentimes, as an example, you'll connect a list of goals to a list of tasks, and those are separate kind of tables. They're not views of each other. They're just separate altogether. And so you can connect them using a lookup field. And then you can integrate any of the packs data you want to as well. So any of the packs that are integrated. And the last thing that one of the most germane things about databases is that you can also take information about them. So when you add a row, you get a set of metadata that's just specific to that row. So like who it was created by, when it was created, who last modified it, when it was last modified. So some basic kind of database-y type things that are specific to the way that databases work. Let me show one more example. Actually, I can show a couple of them. Team directory is a wiki. Somebody had asked about that. I can show quickly how this works. So in this example, I'm starting with a table of people. So in this, the wiki that this company or this team wanted was, how do I take all of the people in the company based on their role, their location, start date, what team they're on, who their manager is, and then how do I create multiple ways of viewing this such that someone can see them by team or by role, etc. And you can see that I have that. First, I have this table of people. I've got the picture column format here as an example. I got this teams and roles. These are actually the lookups that I mentioned earlier. So you can see I have team 1, team 2, team 3, and I've got a lookup which is pulling in the team members who are part of that. And so if I hover over these, you'll see the information from that team member. And then similarly in this roles table, I've got the same kind of lookup here, which is pulling in all the people who fill that role. And then from the wiki perspective, now I can create these directories by team. So team 1 gets their little space here. This is actually a what we call a detail layout of this. Let me go and edit doc so I can play with this here. This is kind of like a different layout of a table. So if I go in here, you can see that this again is just that table above. But what it lets me do is,
yep,
you guys can still see my screen, right? Detail is just a way of creating like this little card experience, and it has a little search box, so I can go and look at who's on team 1, go here, look at team 2, got their start dates and their roles. So I get to create these spaces, and literally these are just views off of this table filtered down to that team. So that's a cool wiki case. And the last one I'll show is something that's a little bit more fun, that is less, it's work related, but it kind of shows the extent of what you can build, which is a process you might, I gotta do the @ symbol here. Something that you probably never thought to build, but is something you would build to if you had the ability. So we have somebody in our office named Ben, who every single, and there's a video I did on YouTube about this. He's like kind of the office savior when it comes to coffee making. He's the one who like always goes, make sure that the pot's full, and then he'll always just type this like really like short message that says made coffee in our public Slack channel for our office. And I was like, man, how do we get more people involved in doing this so he doesn't feel like he's the Lone Ranger who has to do it all the time? And then how do you kind of incentivize it a bit? And so I made this little coffee log doc. And what it does, it's really straightforward. It has a button here, and what this button does, actually I'll go into edit doc and show you. This button adds rows to a log table, and it's only one section. So if I hover over this, it adds row to this coffee maker log table, and that's it. And that will fill in the person who made the coffee, and will take the current date and time that they did it. And then what it will do is, there's a little Slack button here that will send a Slack message to our public channel that says that person made coffee. So person doesn't have to do anything, it just automatically does it. And actually it does it with an automation. So Slack is integrated, and then I've got this little coffee Slacker button. And what it does is every time a row is changed in that coffee log table, then it pushes that Slack button. So it's just like a quick way of it automatically sending out notification. And then I can build this little chart, which is again, just a view of this coffee maker log that shows the number of times people are making coffee. And it shows that I'm currently winning in the winning streak of coffee making. But again, like this is not something you would buy software for. But it is something that like speaks to, we use this type of process actually, not just for coffee making, which is silly, but for things like bug bashes internally. We're about to roll out a feature, so we create this kind of leaderboard concept for like, hey, during this hour, as many people as can bug bash, like the number of bugs you find, you get like a prize, and you can see these updating visuals of people squashing bugs. We do the same thing for watering plants in the office, because it's like if nobody waters them, they're always dying. So we have like a rotation that automatically Slacks people every day.
Yeah, this is
so it's these really, kinds of things that are operating.
It's really useful, because I think in a moment where people are using, well, I know we're using docs. So we've got kind of a lot of like automations happening like everywhere in the business, and then we've got docs, which kind of sit in like a separate silo. They're not automated, like they're not smart. They're only as good as everybody updates them. So if like they're not working off of like integrations, they're not pulling anything in, they're just static until you change them. And when comparing that to other sides of the business, say the Makerpad site, which is like Webflow, Airtable, Zapier, MemberStack, and all the emails, all the automations are really smart, and they're saving us a bunch of time and allow us to do so much. Then our docs are still quite dumb. So this is where these little button automations and pulling in times and then triggering things off the side of it this is where I think this could be really powerful, especially because building those when then automations on the side, once you start getting the hang of just creating those little things, even for like team stand-ups and tasks completed, and then visualizing information at like the end of the week or the start of the week, or if something comes up that's unscheduled, you can just like, press a button and like everybody else will know kind of like what's going on or where you are, if you've got to like take a call or step out, especially for say like remote teams as well, to update just a constant like communication flow, just to make sure that everyone knows what's going on. Those that's really useful. I'm actually just diving in because I know we've got a couple of Integromat fans. I think see if Glenn. I think Glenn is here. He's a big Integromat fan, and I just had a look at to see you are integrated with Integromat, and I like the fact that with Integromat they usually go pretty deep in terms of like the API depth of their integration, so you can actually do some really good controls over each document and each folder, and creating a row and listing your docs and listing sections and getting a specific column, or listing a formula, for instance, even when you get down to that granular level. And
yeah,
I think one of the things is people aren't used to interacting with docs this way, so it's kind of new to people. But I think once people start getting the hang of making their docs smart and triggering other workflows off the back of it, that's going to be really cool.
Yeah, that's kind of the nature, that like the concept of a doc is powerful as an app. I think the starting point should feel simple. Like you can do things like your to-do list, your day-to-day management of stuff you need to get done, but you can start as you expand on that idea, it ends up becoming what feels like an application that you developed, and it's super. Even the smaller cases, like the ones I just showed, just feel like I've now removed cycles from my day. I've now feel like I'm kind of automating certain parts of my life that maybe weren't value add, but I'm also like establishing patterns for how I actually want to run my day to day versus having tools define me and how I'm supposed to work. So that's been a fun journey for us, and especially someone who's worked in the product for a long time.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
What's been like the most out there use case you've seen people use for it that you didn't expect so far?
That's a great question. An engineer internally just built a Hangman game. I'd say like most of the use cases that are wild and out there to me are kind of games. Actually, let me show you one really quick. I'm presuming for a moment that your audience is into this kind of stuff. We've got so what was it called? Darkness Leave. Yeah,
I saw it as well. Just while I remember, you've got a discourse pack, haven't you, for Coda?
Yes. Yeah. We actually, our community is on Discourse, and we have a Discourse
how does that
pack
work
as well.
when embedded or attached to Coda? Can you reply to like threads from your Coda doc?
It's not. Let me actually sign in really quick. I don't actually have my Discourse profile set up, but it'll let you do, like, you can pull in live data. So if you have a post, it'll let you pull back information from the post, topics and categories. I don't believe you can push information back to Discourse just yet, but certainly something we can think about. This was a hilarious. So our friend Daniel created this game, and essentially you kind of like, he hasn't updated this yet, but you have this, like, these buttons that allow you to reset the game, create a player, select difficulty, and quote unquote insert coin to start. And then he created a button-based navigation of this board. And so if you look at this footage, you can see that he's using buttons. That's a table that's grouped on the top and left. And he literally can move this little character around, and hidden within the board are all these obstacles, and you kind of lose hearts and stuff like that. So I mean, like, when we talk about
Yeah.
the power of applications, this is kind of testing, going all the way to the limit of it. But yeah, these are some of the craziest things I've seen from our community. It's been super fun to watch what they're able to stretch this tool.
So what's on the roadmap for this year then? What's coming soon?
Yeah, so publishing was a big one, I think, for folks in this community. Like, you know, in the same way that Makerpad, you guys publish tutorials and examples of how you can use things, publishing Coda docs is now one of the ways that you can take things like my plan your day doc and share it with the world and let people experience it and
do you publish that onto like a temporary domain, or can you publish it onto a full domain?
So you publish it onto, you create a maker profile. So you get to choose your name. It's kind of like Medium in the sense that you get a slug and then you can populate, you can share things through that. And there's a question here around, can you use it for external facing web apps? That's actually part of the intent for this, is that if you wanted to, when you publish something, actually I can share my screen really quickly again. So when you publish something, you'll see it's part of our sharing dialogue, and what you're able to do is decide where you're going to post it. Is it discoverable? So is it something that will be subject to Google search and SEO? And then what kind of interaction level do I want of that doc? So I might set it to view only if it's like literally just publishing a post or something like that. So we've got folks publish blog posts. Reid Hoffman actually just published his split scaling guide using this mode. Play mode is more about, let me find this here, Rahul. We actually have the ability for you to play. So externally, if you wanted to like play with the data or the different controls in Coda, you can do that. So example, Superhuman, which I'm sure most people are familiar with in this community, a new email client. They had this really popular post about how they do product market fit evaluation. They do a bunch of surveys, and we created with them a way of exploring their actual data set. And you can do that in this published doc experience. So you can see how to set up your survey, all of the responses, and the scores. And then you can go in and actually analyze the feedback, looking at something like a word cloud, which is a new one of our new layouts that we have. Cool. And this is a published doc, so someone can play with this. It almost feels like an interactive blog post, but you're able to play with that data. And then lastly, you can like create an externalized web app. As an example, Blogilates they have a monthly calendar they do for fitness, for workouts. She publishes, daily workouts that people will do throughout the month. And this interactive calendar is a public kind of web app of sorts where you can join the workout with all of the community. And then through that, you can go and mark workouts to complete if they come up that day. You can actually watch the YouTube video of the workout and mark it done here. And then you get like a little progress bar of all the participants. So these are people who are, February was a little bit of a rough month for a bunch of folks to join, but yeah, you can kind of get like, this is for the public web app version.
Could you share that example link in the chat, just so you've got it, so we can see that Blogilates one? That was quite a cool use case. So we've been on for 58 minutes. So I've got a couple of questions that I want to ask, which I think worth just diving into. Firstly, mobile view of docs. Have you got anything you can show on your screen? That's really pretty tricky, just because that was one of the things which I thought was really useful, because a lot of these, especially like browser-based tools, they kind of get stuck when it gets to mobile. So I know that it's like a lot of them are like a downplayed version and they're like quite clunky and everything, but I know Coda does a lot better job than a lot of people on the mobile side.
Totally. So let me show you an example of that. So this is another kind of welcome doc. With mobile, I think I mentioned before, we try to conform the we try to take all the building blocks and then connect them in mobile in a way that makes sense with most mobile paradigms. And so what that means is, if I shift this, I refresh, what you'll notice is that first the section list, which was at the sidebar, is now on the bottom here. So I've got these icons, which are easy for me to navigate. So now I can go and see tables, I can see views, whatever. All the content kind of conforms to the screen width the way that I would expect it to. I can click and interact with those things like that collapsible content here. I can do that all within this doc, and then I've got the same kind of interaction pattern. And then you'll see tables will render as cards by default, so that they don't feel like they're you're trying to stare at a spreadsheet on a vertical screen. And so it's now kind of collapsed a bunch of those columns. If I click on it, it takes me to the detail of that item, so I can do things like change the progress, change who's it's assigned to, that kind of stuff. And things like buttons. So on this row in the table, there's a button that lets me mark things done. So if I swipe this, actually, I'll do it from this section here. If I swipe one that's in progress, you'll see that button is actually showing up as a swipe action. So now I hit mark is done, and now it's done. So I get a lot of these, these little experiences that kind of you've come to expect in mobile. We try to automatically apply them so that it feels a lot more native than, if we just literally showed you the desktop experience on mobile.
This kind of just makes it so much more usable from like a task management side, especially if you're like on the move. It's often like a pain. Say if you often like have Slack, and then you have your like task management stuff, but some of it's always like, especially access to docs. Docs is always kind of like sat as a separate thing, but now it can kind of integrate with the rest of your like tasks and like the summary data, and you can see what everybody else is doing. So it doesn't have to all sit separately, which is what I like. And the last thing I wanted to ask is, I saw that there was a sneaky Chrome extension, so I wanted to ask what that does.
Yeah, actually, the Chrome extension we created originally to manage with Coda. We had historically had a single browser tab for restriction on docs, just to manage kind of the performance. The fact that it's kind of a synchronized collaborative surface means that you're managing all the chat cursors and stuff like that. But that actually is being relaxed. We're in the process of rolling out multi-tab support, so that Chrome extension won't really be as necessary for those types of things anymore.
Nice. I just want to nip it. There's potentially like a way to get like information into Coda. So is there any other ways? Like, well, I guess you can do anything with Zapier. I was just thinking of other ways to like fire information like into Coda, whether you could like interact with it by like a Slack bot, or, but I suppose the world's your oyster when you're integrated with Integromat and Zapier. So.
Yeah, I'd say like there's a set of partners that are more kind of their integration partners, like Zapier and Integromat, where anything you can build, any kind of process you can build, you can point that at a Coda doc and either use it to create or add data to tables or modify data in tables, or you can use it to create docs as an example. We've seen people like templatize a process and then want to copy a doc every time a new project kicks off. We want to take the same doc we use.
I guess you can do that with buttons as well, can't you? So like like start of your day, you can press a button and it will just generate you the new template. Nice.
Yeah, totally. And then our native packs, for any of the ones that are in our packs marketplace, you can kind of pull all of the data relevant to a specific tool, like putting in all of your Jira issues, your GitHub pull requests for a specific repo, and all of them will just synchronize down to the doc. and will stay kind of in sync, either manually or you can do it automatically.
Can you do, this is probably a niche thing, can you do like custom, can you write like custom functions, like on like a slash or an at? Can you write anything like that?
We've gotten that question before. The short answer is one of the aspirations for packs in specific was that we could extend that type of functionality where you want to define, not only do you want to define an integration with another tool, but you want to define what the functions are for that integration. One thing you can do in Coda today, which is super helpful, is you can kind of define variables or results. So for example, in this case, I had this like table and I was just capturing the number of tasks for the beta project, right? And if I want to reuse this result somewhere else, I actually name this to be the beta tasks. And now that named thing, I can pull in wherever else in the doc I want to. So if I type equals and then I type beta tasks, I now get that result. And so anytime I like make updates to that, it updates throughout the doc. So it's just a quick way of reusing formulas, but it's not necessarily you're defining the formula, you're just defining the result. But it's
that's really cool
on our list.
Love it. Sahil, was refreshing. I think was it you missed part of the answer to your question, the previous question, Sal? Was it about web apps? Can it talk to Webflow, Bubble, or any no-code app builders like that? Well, I guess answering part of that, you can obviously integrate Coda with Webflow, as you can just cut in through Zapier or Integromat. So I guess you could create new records into the CMS through a Coda table.
Yeah, I think the main one of the goals of our publishing feature set was to answer this question a bit, where it's like you shouldn't have to feel like the back end of your tool is different from the front end. There's something that we've grappled with a bit is like Coda in a lot of ways feels like a no-code product, in the sense that you can use things like spreadsheet formulas and tables and views to create an app-like experience. But it's not as much focused on it. It historically hasn't been as much focused on the like what's the end result that you're putting out into the world. And publishing is kind of finishing that part of the feature set out so that you can publish in these different modes, either in the mode that feels like a blog post or the mode that feels like an interactive document or one that feels like an application you can interact with. So our goal is to solve for those cases where we can for things like getting your doc published out to the world.
2 more questions, only 2. One, so here's just 2 features from tools which prove really popular just in like the Maker community. One, being able to like make API calls from inside the app. This is like a feature of like dash. Is that possible within Coda? And second question, I'll ask both of them and you can just answer them at the same time. Second question is forms. I know obviously one of the key features and people find really useful and we use a lot in Airtable. Any plans to have that?
Yeah. So the first question around formulas and kind of the dash type functionality, that is like our formula language in the canvas in the spreadsheet is kind of meant to accomplish that. And so when you can do a number of different deeper things that I kind of skipped over for the purposes of being brief, but like
for those who've made it this far.
As an example, like, right, exactly. But like, when you connect the weather pack, I now have access to this weather formula, and I can do a couple of different things in here, right? So like now I get access to 2 formulas, the current forecast or the current weather, and then the daily forecast based on location. And so in this case, I can pass in a city, and then I can choose like which date I want. And so I can write these things in here. What year is it? 2020. let's say 03, and then what's today's date? The 10th. Let's say I want to see it for the 13th. And so now I'm operating on that external data set, and I've now returned the actual expected forecast for a future date now. I can do those types of things too, where if I wanted to like pull in a list of, let's see if I have anything else integrated with this doc. Like if I want to pull a list of Jira tasks and then operate on that, I can add filters and stuff like that in the formula language itself.
Yeah.
Does that answer that?
So it kind of stops kind of short of just writing like a straight GET request as like just straight into like as like a part of the formula. But I guess the workaround for that would just be using like Integromat to say like watch for a new row, and then perform a GET request using some of the parameters from the new row that was created, and then firing the result back into Coda. So I guess you can use it that way, and then attach that to a button perhaps, so you can kind of grab data once a day, for instance. That might work. Could you?
Yeah, I'm actually. You can do. I'm trying to connect an account here that works. You can do those types, like you can pull back the details about a specific issue and stuff like that too, or pull requests. For whatever reason, Nigeria integration, or just remove this from this doc, and then re-add it. Sign in, boom, only you. Perfect. So now I've got Jira integrated, and so I should be able to type, and I can pull back issues, and I can actually filter that list, or I can like pass in the issue ID and then get the information back from that issue too. So it's kind of like a GET in that way. Same thing with GitHub, etc. This environment may be down for some reason.
That's right. It's obviously like a more of a niche, hardcore power user type thingy. And I think the other one was like having like a native Coda form. So say if you published a Coda doc, and then you wanted to like make it public, and then put a form, and then it can go straight into a CMS. Thoughts on that?
Yeah,
could be possible.
We've thought a lot about that. And we have plans to do, or we've talked about the way we'd want forms to actually appear. Actually, one of the interesting things, so as I showed in tables before, when you click into a row, you actually get this kind of cardified experience of that row. So you get like all that information laid out in this kind of grid format. And so what I can do is, for example, as with a button, let's say this is the thing that adds rows to this table. I can actually make this button pop open that modal for editing. And so it actually feels like a form. So when I press that button, it pulls up this new row, and I say, this is a new thing. I can check this box. I can change the states. And so then that feels like a form experience within the doc. And so usually the combination of this row modal here, as well as that type of usage of buttons, is a common pattern we see for like new bugs or new feature requests or new whatever. And that if you have a published doc that is external, presuming somebody's logged in, they can click this button and add their things as well. We'd expect that you could publish your, actually, we have a PAX.
You could just replace the column headers with a question, for instance. Could you?
Right, exactly. We have a PAX request area where you can actually ask for packs that you, I don't know if we've totally integrated it just yet. But if you have a pack you want to suggest, here we go. Once this loads, you see that this is actually a public Coda doc, and I can click this button, and this will let me pick from an existing list of things that people have
Okay.
requested, or add a new one, and then tell us about your use case. And that is just like, this is an external form at this point, where I'm now capturing all these different ideas, and then people can upvote them in this public forum as well. So we've got a lot of requests for a Google Sheet pack.
Oh no.
Google Drive, we just launched Google Drive. But yeah, it's like a super, like this is essentially a form, but it's a little bit more robust.
Yeah, that's cool. I think one of the things that we hear all the time with, say, like Airtable forms is you just know that the information you're getting is going to go exactly as you need it into the table, like every single time in the right format, even if, say, someone makes like a dodgy zap that doesn't format the date correctly and just breaks the whole thing. Like Airtable, like the forms in Airtable didn't just done a good job of making sure that that info comes in exactly how you need it. So, but yeah, like you said, you can use that pop-up modal and you can use that button just to create a pop-up and then just rename the column headers as a question, and then you get it. I guess you can do like a placeholder. Could you do a when then automation that say when a new row gets added to this table, create a new row in another table, but then under different headers maybe? So you have like, what is your name in one table? And then that gets put in another table which just says name. So you don't have like dodgy questions formatted column headers.
Yeah. Automations, you can see my screen again, right? So yeah, the triggers are either row changes or time-based. So if I do row change, I can choose like a certain table, even choose column. And then I can take one of the, this will look familiar. This is the list of actions you can do with buttons, but you can also do with automations. So I can add rows to another table, modify, delete. I can push other buttons. So we often have like chains of buttons that you'll see.
You can push a button with an automation.
Yeah, and you can push a button with a button. So yeah, you can like chain all these things together as you get more and more familiar with the product. But yeah, like even that most simplistic version of when something's added.
Is the F for like a custom formula? So when then formula sort of thing?
Yeah. Most of these structured, we call them structured builders. So this lets you like kind of progressively fill out what you're doing. But behind the scenes, there's a set of formulas that power this. So if you're more comfortable doing a like the formulaic version of this, then you can do it. But most people will start with just this builder. So like if I do an add row and I choose like this table and I undo, you'll see that it actually is a formula, an add row formula.
Okay, nice. And also, how does the notify function work?
Notify will simply, it uses our kind of standard notification. So anybody who has access to this doc, you can choose how you notify them. So I can go specific users, this is myself, and then I can send a message, and this will send kind of a standard notification email. So like when certain actions happen in a doc, you'll get notification emails by default, and you can just use this to trigger a specific
If you had Coda on your phone, does it come through as like a iOS notification or just an email?
So this will be notifications you do will show up in kind of a notifications box, as well as in the email form. And then I'm just pulling up my phone here to show the setup here. It's a little harder to do on. So you can turn on notifications and just either have them be in the notification center or banners, things like that, on your phone. So this is like Coda phone.
Nice. Yeah, I like the idea of having say like a published doc, and I don't know, like an example use case would be, say you're like managing a some podcast guests, for instance, and then you had like a list of upcoming guests, and people could kind of go in and they can view the doc, and they can maybe like add questions, and then have an automation based off of that to say the 10 pick at the certain date, pull out the 10 most upvoted questions, and then put this together into like a summary doc, and then it sends it to whoever's kind of conducting the interview as like a bit like a prep doc, something like that. So you can kind of combine your like public facing stuff with your automations, and then obviously your triggers and actions based off of that, which that was kind of something that was obviously lacking on just the pure like Word. People used to writing like Word docs and stuff. A lot of automations were kind of stopping short of being triggered from documents.
Yeah, we use it a lot for virtual events. So we've gone on like a webinar. We'll share a doc with the people who are on the webinar. It's a public doc, and people can like add in questions to like a little like the same kind of table structure. And there's like a button column that lets you upvote and downvote questions.
Okay, that's cool.
Similar to the features that I showed before. And then you have space to kind of demo stuff, and it's just like, again, it's like otherwise it would have been a Google Doc that's just all text and people could jam on it together, but you're not really doing anything super meaningful.
Yeah,
and
it's
then
messy as hell.
Yeah, and with the docs that we end up building, like you have this little upvote downvote thing, but you can also send email follow-ups from that. You can you can do a bunch of other things that just make it much more interactive and fun.
Definitely. Love it.
Yeah.
Thanks for taking the time to deep dive into that. I know we got a bit like into the weeds at the end, but I think that's what some people like to look at, because I know just from like our community, you've got people who kind of use it at the surface level, and then you've got the power users who really use it, and then they want to know about like all the automations, and if they're making like a decision between whether to use something like Notion, but they've got like heavy automations on the other side of their business, then they might consider something like Coda just purely for the automation side. So I think it's just key to like dive into a couple of those areas, just so people know kind of where, like, what it can do, what it can't do, etc.
Yeah, and always happy to answer questions that folks have. If you are, you can always email help@coda.io or email me directly, evan@coda.io. We love, it's not obvious, there are many of us, most of us, who love playing with this product day in and day out. So there's a lot of problems that we can solve for teams and individuals, and we're always happy to jump in and help.
Is there any more questions that anybody has, or we've got a couple of minutes while he's here live in person? Colleen, have you got any, where he was here live in person? I think he may have gone, or maybe just either ran away before the questions.
No, I'm still here.
No, yeah. So any questions, anything that we didn't cover, any questions that you wish I'd asked that I didn't, or anything we kind of glossed over that you wish we kind of stopped and took a more of a look at? Are you okay for time, Evan? You got a couple of minutes? I know you've been an hour and 20 minutes. All good? Colleen, cool.
Thanks, Colin.
Any comparisons anybody wants to make between two products? I know the automation side is probably the biggest differentiator for me.
Yeah, I mean, those, I think the foundations of the product, starting with the doc, we're pretty convinced are just people want that flexibility and simplicity. But once you start getting your fingers on all the different parts of the product, it gets
can you,
as far as you want.
just a question from me, can you use it like as a doc? Can you just like print out your like docs or PDF them up, or can you do that with them?
Yeah, you can print and you can print to PDF through Chrome or whatever browser you use. We actually surprisingly have a lot of people who still do that, like take them to meetings and stuff. But, we're especially
keep a hard copy just in case.
Yeah, just in case. I mean, what's really interesting right now is without too much commentary on like the world at large, there's a lot of companies that are starting to be exposed to remote work for the first time if they haven't been before, and so a lot of we've been a remote company for as long as we've been in. I mean, we started with folks who are based in Seattle and in the Bay Area. So we have Seattle office, we have one in Mountain View and one in San Francisco, and then a flexible kind of policy for folks who need to take care of stuff at home. Nice. So we end up using Coda a ton for these remote engagements. Like when you're in meetings, we'll use actually the Q&A, like what we call it a Dory, but like a question moderator. We'll use that in our meetings, and we'll have it up on the screen, and you'll see people adding questions or thoughts or topics.
Oh, right, that's cool.
Upvote and downvote those. We'll use it to prioritize and make sure that the meeting's inclusive. So yeah, a lot of the it's kind of the counterpoint to the printing example. It's like moving towards a mode where you can create these experiences that bring people together, and it's been we've seen that recently.
Brilliant. I think that is probably a good spot to wrap it up.
Sounds great.
Thank you. Thanks so much for your time, Evan. I really appreciate that. That was a good like a good deep dive for me as much as anybody else. Like I really enjoyed that to actually just see what it's capable of. And I know there's lots of light bulbs kind of going off on my head about what we should be using this for. So yeah, appreciate your time.
Of course. Thanks for having me on. And
thanks everybody for sitting through an hour and 25 minutes of us talking. I know that's everyone has busy lives. So yeah, appreciate you taking the time out to listen to us. And Evan, where can anyone find you? I know is there any social links that you are active on or not?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, Evan Davies. I can ping that out as well. And also just on evan@coda.io.
Nice. And also, if anybody really like this, then give them a shout out on Twitter at Coda_HQ as well.
That's right.
Let me just grab them 2 seconds so everyone has it. Here we go. My email is just tom@makerpad.co as well. So if you've got any questions, you can get me on that. Cool. Let's wrap it up. Thanks again, Evan, and we will speak to you all soon. This webinar is also available on replay for everybody. So you can go back and watch that, skip through to the bits that you like, and you can rewatch. So enjoy.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
See you later.
See ya.
Bye.